in this section, we're going to be factoring trinomials with a is greater than 1. So remember, this unit or this section is factoring polynomials. What is my first step always? My first step always is to take out a GCF. If I can take out a GCF, you can't stop. Then you ask yourself, okay, can I keep factoring? So we ask ourselves, is it a difference of square? We've already talked about difference of squares. Does it fit this pattern? Can you square the first term? Can you square the second term? And is it a negative? And if so, a minus b, a plus b. That's the first method we learned. The second method was, is this a basic trinomial? So is our leading coefficient a 1? If it is, then I look for the c and the two numbers that multiply together to give me c and add together to give me b. Okay, that was the basic trinomial. Now, after we take out our GCF, we ask ourselves, can we do a difference of square? Can we do a basic trinomial? And if not, if it's not a basic trinomial, it may look like this, where a is greater than 1. So now we have a new method of how to factor these trinomials. And that's what we're going to be learning today, is factoring where a is greater than 1. Okay, so let's look at our notes. You already know how to factor using the GCF, or excuse me, using the basic trinomial. So here, two numbers that multiply together to give me 45 and combine together to give me 14. So 5 and 9, so I would do x plus 5, x plus 9. Remember on these, my first step, take out a GCF. Don't stop, because you can keep going. So what two numbers multiply together to give you a negative 12, and when combined to give you a positive 1? So 4 and negative 3. So a plus 4, a minus 3. Don't forget to bring down that 2. Okay, so that's just a refresher of what we learned last time. Now, I am not teaching you this method of slip and slide because your upper school teachers do not want you learning that method. So we're not going to do that. So I'm going to show you two different ways how to do it. I'm going to show you the reverse box method. So remember when we started multiplying, if I asked you to multiply 2x plus 5 times 3x minus 2, okay, and we boxed that method, remember how we did 2x plus 5 and 3x minus 2? Okay, so we multiplied 2x times 3x to give me 6x squared, 2x times negative 2 to give me negative 4x, 3x times 5 to give me 15x, and negative 2 times 5 to give me negative 10. I combined my like terms, and my final answer was this. Do you remember doing that? Okay, now we're going to work from inside the box out. So we're going to fill in our area, and then we're going to find the length and the width. So we have to have a method, of course. So here's the deal when you do the reverse box. We are filling this box in. Your first term and your last term never change. They don't change. I keep a 2x squared and I keep a positive 3. That doesn't change, okay? Now, once you have this, you need to multiply 2 times 3. What is 2 times 3? It's 6. Now 6 becomes my magic number, where I'm looking for two numbers that multiply together to give me 6, but when combined still need to give me that positive 5. And it's going to be 2 and 3. They multiply together to give me 6. They add together to give me 5. Now, remember, this is your quadratic term. These are your linear terms. So not only do you have to have a 2, but you need to put that variable of x, because I'm splitting it. 2x plus 3x is going to give me that 5x. So you have to have that linear term of x there. Now my box is filled in, okay? So now what we're going to do is we're just going to take the factor, the greatest common factor of this column, the greatest common factor of this column, the GCF of this column, and the GCF of this column. That's it. And then we can check our answer because it's already in the box. So watch what I mean. So if I take the GCF here, these both have an x in them. The GCF of this column is 1. Nothing else goes into those but 1. So now when I take the GCF of this row, 2x squared and 2x is my GCF. When I take the GCF here, 3x and 3, that GCF is 3. Now, I can check my answer super fast. That's why I like this method, because I can see 2x times x, 2x squared. 2x times 1, 2x. 3 times x, 3x. 3 times 1, 3. I got my length and my width. I just need to write it. So my length, x plus 1, and my width, 2x plus 3. And I've already checked it because I took the time to look. Does that multiply? Does that multiply? Does that multiply? Does that multiply? And it combines to give me a 5x. Therefore, that's the right answer. Okay? All right. Example 2, I'm going to show you is grouping method. So we're going to group this method, and this is reverse box. Reverse. Something is really screwing up today. This is reverse box. And this is going to be the grouping method. Okay, and we're going to use both of these in class, so you need to know how to do both of them. Okay, well, it's very similar to this box. My first term doesn't change, and my last term doesn't change. Okay, doesn't change. And I still have to multiply 5 times 6. 5 times 6 is 30. And again, finding that magic number in those numbers, that's the hardest part. Once you find that, it's golden. It's no big deal. So 5 times 6 is 30. Two numbers multiply together to give me 30 and combine together to give me a negative 17. If you can't think of those off the top of your head, just start writing them down. 1 and negative 30, 2 and negative 15, because only one of those can be, oh, nope, they both have to be positive. So both of these have to be negative. Two numbers multiply together to give me a positive 30 and combine together to give me a negative. So negative 2 and negative 15 are going to be my answers. So notice the first term doesn't change and the last term doesn't change. All I'm doing is I'm splitting up this negative 17m and I'm making it negative 2m. What is going on? Negative 2m and negative 15m. And it doesn't matter. I could put negative 15m there and negative 2m there. It's not going to matter. But what I've done is I've broken up the negative 17m. And you'll notice these combine to be negative 17. Perfect. So grouping method just says, okay, let's take the first two terms and the second two terms. And notice there's no break in between because that means multiplication. So now I'm just going to take out my GCF of this first group. So they both have an m in common. And what's left over? 5m minus 2. My goal here is to make sure that when you take your GCF out, you're left with a 5m minus 2. Those GCFs need to be the same. So I need this to be negative. So look at my signs. This guy needs to be positive and this guy needs to be negative. If that happens, you have to take a negative outside with it. So I'm going to take a negative 3 out. Then negative 15 divided by negative 15 is 5m. Positive 6 divided by negative 3 is a positive 2. Or excuse me, a negative 2. So now these guys match. That's perfect. So what do we do when we group? We bring the matching one together, 5m minus 2. And then we just combine these GCFs to make it the second binomial. And then, of course, we can box it, we can multiply it to make sure it matches. So this is the grouping one. All right, let's do another grouping, and then we will do another reverse box. So remember in the grouping, my first term doesn't change, my last term doesn't change. I still have to multiply 6 times negative 4 to give me a negative 24. This is the most important part. It's finding those two numbers. So what are two numbers that multiply together to give me negative 24 and combine together to give me negative 5? Negative 8 and 3 are going to combine to give me negative 5 and multiply together to give me negative 24. Perfect. So I'm splitting up that middle term and I'm putting negative 8y and a positive 3y. So again, they combine to give me negative 5, multiply together to give me negative 24. Perfect. I now have 4 terms. I split them evenly. And now I just take my GCF. So the GCF of binomial is a 2y, and I'm left with 3y minus 4. And look, that's 3y minus 4. I still have to take the GCF out. And what's the GCF of 3y minus 4? 1. So I have to take a 1 out, and I'm left with 3y minus 4. So these match. That's good. That's a way to check myself. They have to match. If they don't, you did it wrong. So I get 3y minus 4. And to make my second binomial, I just combine these guys to get 2y plus 1. And that's my final answer. And of course, I can check my answer. Okay, let's do example 4 together. And we're going to reverse box this one. Okay, so remember on the reverse box, my first term doesn't change, my last term doesn't change. I still need to multiply these guys to give me a negative 60. So now I'm looking for two numbers that multiply together to give me a negative 60 and combine to give me a positive 11. I can't think of that one off the top of my head. So I'm just going to start listing 2 and 30 is not going to do it. 3 and 20 is not going to do it, no matter which one's negative. Let's do a negative 5 and a positive 12. That's not going to do it. Negative 6 and a positive 10 is not going to do it. Let's do 4 and 15. That's going to do it. Which one needs to be negative? Negative 4 and a positive 15. Those are the ones that are going to combine to give me that negative 60 and that positive 11. So remember what I do with these two. These are linear terms. So I put a negative 4c and a 15c because I'm splitting this term. So that's why I have that value of c there. Now all I do is I take my GCF of both columns. The GCF here of this column is going to be 3c. The GCF here is a negative 1. They both have a negative, so that's going to be a negative 1. The GCF of this row is going to be 4c, and the GCF here is going to be 5. Now that I have done that, I'm going to check my answer. I'm already here. Let's do it. So 12c squared, negative 4c, 15c, negative 5. Perfect. So now I take 4c plus 5 and 3c minus 1, and voila, I have my binomials that have been factored. Okay, let's go back to remembering our first step. So we'll practice these in class, but remember, in your first step, you always want to look for a GCF. Yes, there's a GCF. 5 is my GCF. So I took a 5 out. I have 2k squared minus 15k plus 7. They don't have anything else in common, so that's great. But I can't stop factoring. I took my GCF out. It's not a difference of square. It's not a basic trinomial, but it is a trinomial that I can factor where a is greater than 1. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to factor that. And I'm going to do the grouping method here. So remember in the grouping method, my first term doesn't change, my last term doesn't change. I still multiply those numbers. 2 times 7 is 14. Two numbers that multiply together to give me 14 and combine together to give me 15 are 1 and 14. So I split that up and I get plus 1k plus 14k, just what I did. I'm just moving this 15k to reflect that linear term. And then I split it up 2 and 2, and I take out my GCF. So I take out a k here. I'm left with 2k plus 1. And over here, I take out a 7, and I'm left with 2k plus 1. Perfect. These match up. 2k plus 1. And to make that other binomial, I just combine that k and 7 to be k plus 7. So I have factored that. So now watch what I'm going to do. I factored this trinomial into 2k plus 1 and k plus 7, but do not forget to bring down that GCF because it is all of that that makes up that trinomial. Okay? So we'll practice that in class, but if you're lost, come and see me.